Alright, so when I came up with this idea, I had a lot to say, but it's been a little bit, and now I'm not so sure. As I mentioned, I've been rereading through the Harry Potter books, and one thing that, I mean, even before rereading them, that kind of got to me was trying to differentiate between Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. Because anytime they're referred to in a group setting, like when they're both in the room, which isn't very often, mind you, like for a married couple that has as many kids as they do and that seems to want to be and support and love each other all the time, they're not around each other very much. But when they are on the same page and they're having dialogue, it's like Mr. Weasley said, Mrs. Weasley said. And when you're reading quickly, it's hard to tell. Like, you have to kind of go back and check. Like, why would Oh, it was Mrs. Weasley that said that. So why not just refer to them as Arthur and Molly all the time? You know? Arthur said this. Molly said this. I mean, they do it with all the other characters. Snape said this. Remus said this. You know? So why does it have to be Mr. and Mrs. Weasley all the time? And I get, like, they're the only two characters in the book that have, like, this... Mr. and Mrs. Dursley kind of do the same thing, but even still, Vernon is often, or Mr. Dursley is often referred to as Vernon, and Petunia as Petunia. So I almost wonder if, like, the only reason for it is that, like, Harry sees them as kind of more authority figures than anybody else, and we're seeing it kind of through Harry's perspective, but we're really, I mean, it is called Harry Potter and the fill in the blank, but at the same time, we're seeing what Harry's did. It's not I and me and we, it's Harry did this, Ron did this, Hermione did this. Like, it's an omniscient kind of deal. So I don't understand why Arthur and Molly are not referred to as Arthur and Molly as they're going. And maybe it's just because we're supposed to revere them a little bit more. But even the professors, like, who are supposed to be the highest of authority figures, and the Minister of Magic, like, they refer to him as by his last name only, not Professor, not Minister, not Mr. It's just Scrimgeour, or Fudge, or Thicknessy. That's how I pronounce it. Maybe you disagree. But it's just really confusing to have to read through those pages in which they're all interacting and Molly and Arthur are in the same room, and you have to go back and recheck, like, oh, did I read that correctly? Was it Mr. Weasley? Was it Mrs. Weasley? And maybe I'm the only one that has this problem, but those are two characters specifically that I have that problem with in any book series that I've read. I just have more trouble with those two names, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, than I do with any other Mr. and Mrs. I don't know why. But that's just my take on it. I wish, I mean, there's nothing that can be done about it now, that Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were more often referred to as Arthur and Molly. See you tomorrow.